Hi everyone, welcome back to the Always Active podcast, the show that empowers you to lead an active lifestyle. I'm your host Katie, and in this episode, I'll be sharing a step-by-step guide with you to help you find your favorite way to exercise, including exercise ideas, different types of training, tips for trying things out, along with tips on how to pick your favorites. And I'll also be sharing my experience to give you a little bit more insight into how I've come up with some of these tips. The point of this episode is really just to demonstrate that there are so many different options when it comes to getting active, and I'm aiming to help you to consider new ways for you to incorporate exercise into your routine. If you already have a fitness routine in place, that's great, and this will really just be inspiration for adding more variety to your routine. But if you're brand new to fitness or you think you dislike exercise, I would argue that it's probably because you just haven't found what works for you yet. And my goal is to convince you that there is something that's out there for you. Fitness is so much more than just going to the gym or running, which I feel is how it's usually portrayed. And hopefully it's empowering that you get to pick an activity that you enjoy and something that works for you. This episode topic was voted for by the Always Active community in my last Instagram poll, which is great. It means you're interested in this topic, and I'm interested in it too, clearly, because it really aligns with the whole theme of the podcast. Also, in future episodes, I'll be bringing on guests to share all the different ways that they exercise, and so it'll be cool to see the different types of exercise that people incorporate into their routine. And it's also related to last episode's study spotlight, and if you remember, the key takeaway from that is that increasing the variety in your routine will help you to stay more motivated. So, without further ado, let's get psyched to move. Kicking things off with this week's study spotlight. This study was interested in how confidence and enjoyment are related to our motivation to exercise. Confidence meaning how capable we feel in our ability to exercise, and enjoyment meaning the rewarding experience that we associate with exercising. The results from this study were that both confidence and enjoyment influence our exercise behavior, but that enjoyment is actually a stronger predictor of exercise than confidence is. So what does this mean? If you want to be more likely to sustain your exercise behavior in the long term, when you're first starting out a new activity, consider prioritizing your enjoyment of the activity rather than focusing on the fact that you probably aren't that confident at the beginning. If you enjoy the activity, then you'll be more likely to build confidence in your ability to do the activity, which will then ultimately feed into your motivation and allow you to sustain the activity that you're doing long term. And this makes sense because when you think of it, when you're first starting out at something, you kind of need to embrace the fact that you're not going to be good at it, or you won't feel super confident from the beginning. It's really just a matter of putting in the reps and focusing on enjoying the process in spite of not being very good at something. But then over time, you're bound to get better, which will increase your confidence. So how can you focus on increasing your enjoyment? Well, you can try a variety of different activities and then pick the ones that you like best. And when tracking your progress, in addition to tracking things like the strength increase or how often you're exercising, consider your enjoyment of the activity as a measure of your progress. Now, linking this to a personal example, when I first started playing golf, I was pretty bad, and to be honest, a few years into it, I'm still pretty bad, but I focus on the fact that I enjoy golf, even if I'm not the most confident or best golfer in the world. My confidence has increased over time, and it will continue to increase over time, but it's the fact that I enjoy it that keeps me motivated to keep up with the sport. Moving on to this week's movement mindset, which is to mix up your routine. This has been on my mind lately because I've been finding ways to mix up my own routine, and also because I've been preparing for this episode, which is very much related to the idea of incorporating new activities. In the past few weeks, I've tried a yoga class with a new instructor, which was a really simple way to try something new because it's the same studio that I'm already going to. It was just a different time of day and a different instructor, and I liked it. The class was led in a different way from usual than what I'm used to, and obviously I have my preferred instructors that I usually like to go to, but by trying out new instructors, I can now incorporate different teaching styles into my rotation of yoga classes that I go to. Another example is that I tried a new heated Pilates class, and this is something that I've never tried before. It was brand new to me, and I really enjoyed it, and it's something that now that I've tried it out once, I'll actually continue incorporating this type of class into my routine going forward. There are obviously lots of different ways to mix up your routine, and these are just small examples. But for the rest of this episode, I'll be giving you lots of ideas to mix up your existing routine or help you to build a routine from scratch if you're brand new to fitness. So now we're jumping into the main topic of the episode, which is how to help you find your favorite way to exercise. And the first thing that I want to do is give you some different ideas to really just prove how many different options there are. And so I've listed 100 different ideas of ways that you can exercise in the show notes. Now, obviously, I'm not going to spend the rest of this episode listing out 100 different ideas, but for the purposes of the podcast, I'll be highlighting some different categories according to different dimensions of fitness, being cardio, strength, and flexibility, and then I'll give some examples that fall into each of those categories. In this list that I've created, there's a ton of variety based on your preferences. So whether you prefer an indoor or outdoor setting, whether you prefer to be working out at home or at a gym, depending on the season, there's different types of options. Also, there's options depending on if you would like to work out in a group, on a team, or independently. And finally, there's options in terms of the skill level required as well as the cost. Something else to note is that you can adapt these activities to meet your unique needs. So the first category is cardio training. And a little definition of cardio is that it refers to rhythmic activities that can be continuously maintained, that elevate your heart rate, and that use large muscle groups. So when we think of cardio, it's really those high intensity activities where you're doing a lot of movement and really getting that heart rate up. Now, some examples of different cardio activities would include your typical cycling, running, swimming, walking, dancing, and high intensity interval training. And a lot of sports also fall under this category of cardio. So things like basketball, hockey, pickleball, soccer, and volleyball, those would all be considered cardio activities. The next category is strength training, and the definition of strength training is resistance activities that increase your muscle strength. Now, I know strength training doesn't always get the best rep necessarily, and a lot of times we can think that strength training is kind of boring and it's only confined to a gym setting, and it's kind of just the basic push-pull leg split or something along those lines. But there's actually so many different types of strength activities that you can do within this category of weightlifting or strength training. So you could do things like athletic training, functional training, bodybuilding, calisthenics, powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, and those are just a few different styles. Also considered to be strength activities would be things like bar, gymnastics, martial arts, and Pilates. So you actually have a lot of different options of ways that you can incorporate strength training, aside from that classic gym split that I think a lot of our brains automatically go to. The next category of training is flexibility training, which is activities that stretch your muscles and increase the range of motion of your joints. Some examples of flexibility activities would include mobility training, stretching, tai chi, and yoga. Hopefully this helps to give you a better idea of the different broad categories of training that exist, and then give you some examples and inspiration of activities that would fall under each of those categories. And again, be sure to refer to that list of 100 different activities linked in the show notes, because I think that's where you can really get inspired and see just how many different options there are. And I haven't even included every single possible physical activity on the list, so if you have any other ideas that are missing from the list, let me know, and I'll add them. Alright, so I've given you ideas, and now before diving into the tips about how to start trying things out, I wanted to share a little bit about my experience to kind of explain where these tips are coming from. I have already covered my fitness journey in another episode, so be sure to go listen to the first episode of the podcast if you'd like a little bit more detail about my whole journey. But right now I just want to kind of chat about how over the course of my fitness journey, I've tried lots of different things out. I did start out with doing things like soccer, running, and phys ed courses during my undergrad. And some of the benefits of getting exposed to these different activities was that it was fun, I learned new skills, and I also learned what I like and what I don't like. I think the most impactful experience that I've had in this journey of trying out different activities was a 30-day challenge that I did in the summer of 2021. And my goal was to do a different activity every day for 30 days. And if you scroll back into my Instagram when I first started my page, you'll see some of the reels that I created documenting this experience. Now keep in mind, because it was the summer of 2021, the gyms still weren't open yet, and so I had to be really resourceful and creative with what I had access to. So I used what was easily available. I did mainly free activities, and I did both indoor and outdoor activities. And some things that I learned from this was that I enjoyed trying new things. It was actually pretty easy to try new things. I was motivated by the variety of different activities that I was doing. And I also discovered some new activities that I've incorporated into my routine to this day. So for example, when I did this 30-day challenge, that was the first time I had ever played golf. And now that's something that I've incorporated into my routine. Some of the challenges of doing this was that it was definitely out of my comfort zone. There were brand new activities that I had never tried before. I also didn't like everything. And I also wasn't good at most things because I was a beginner. So I was starting from absolutely zero skill level. And then the final challenge was that it was totally unrealistic for me to do this in 30 days. Around the 2.5-week mark, I realized that I couldn't do a different activity every single day for 30 days. And so I ended up extending the challenge to still try 30 different activities, but I did it over the course of the whole summer and a little bit into the fall. So I wanted to share this experience with you because I'll be referring back to it a lot when sharing my tips, because that's where I learned most of the tips that I know when it comes to trying out new things. Now, fast forward to today. I currently have my main activities that I like to cycle through in a week, including weightlifting, yoga, Pilates, walking, and golf. And then I sprinkle in other activities here and there because it really is about having an active lifestyle. I'm always down to try out new things. I'm always down to incorporate activities that I haven't done in a while into my routine. And I feel that having this variety each week is what makes my routine enjoyable and sustainable. Things have obviously evolved in my routine over time, and they will continue to evolve. Hopefully, some of these learnings from my experience can help you. And I recommend that you try a similar challenge at some point to really expose yourself to lots of different activities. So circling back to this step-by-step guide for finding your favorite way to exercise. I've given you a bunch of ideas, and now the fun part comes actually trying things out. Now, if you look at this list of 100 ideas, it might seem overwhelming at first. So I encourage you to break things down and have an open mindset. This isn't meant to be overwhelming. You don't need to commit to any of these activities long term. This should just be a low pressure, low cost situation, and the point is just to expose you to different things. My tip is to pick a few interesting activities on this list to try and really just start small. Then set a realistic goal for yourself and create a plan with how you're going to go about trying these new activities. In my case, it was a 30-day challenge, but for you, it might just be picking 5 different activities on that list and committing to trying all of them out by the end of this year. All right, I'm excited to dive into these tips that will help you when trying out these new things, because I feel like a lot of these tips are not necessarily commonly spoken about, and so I think they will be really helpful for you. My first tips have to do with the facilities that you'll be using to try out new activities. So number 1, use easily available facilities, whether it's a park, a nearby trail, some tennis courts, the gym at the school that you're currently going to, the community center near your house, a pool that you have access to, or even the internet. Use things that you can easily access to make this as simple as possible. Another thing is to use free or low-cost trials to just try things out. So I'll give a couple of different examples here. When I first started yoga, I signed up for a 1-month trial at a yoga studio with my friend, and the first month was discounted. So yes, we were committing to pay for the month, but there was no contract after that. We just paid for the 1 month, and it was a 50% off discount compared to what the membership would normally be. Another example is that when I upgraded to my first gym membership, I got a 1-month free trial there. And then another example is that I recently tried out a new group fitness class with my friend, and it was free because your first class is free at that studio. And a lot of studios have that kind of promotion in place. And then my final tip related to accessing a facility is to ask a friend if they have a guest pass to their gym. At one point, one of the gym memberships that I had allowed me to bring a guest once a month. So I'm sure you have some connections to people who are going to a gym with that kind of program in place. And so I would recommend that you try to take advantage of that. The next set of tips is related to taking workout classes. So this can be done either at home using online resources. So for example, I've done Pilates classes, high intensity interval training classes, weightlifting, mobility training, things like that. There are so many resources online freely available on YouTube, and you can follow along to these at home. So that way, if you do want to end up going and signing up for a series of classes or signing up for a gym membership, then you're familiar with this type of activity before you go out and commit to it. If you'd like to take it a step further, you can sign up for a series of classes or lessons. I know a lot of community centers, for example, have this kind of thing in place where, let's say, if you want to go to a series of yoga classes, it'll be available for a certain session. Also, I'd eventually like to take golf lessons. That's on my list of things to do pretty soon. And then another suggestion is just to try out a variety of different classes. I know there are certain apps like ClassPass where you sign up for a ClassPass membership and then you can use credits to try different classes at different studios. Also, if you already have a gym membership, maybe they offer group fitness classes there that you haven't been taking advantage of, so you can try out classes that you haven't done before that way. Or if you are already going to a studio that offers classes, try out a new class that you haven't done before. For example, like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I tried hot Pilates for the first time last week, and that was the studio that I've been going to for a while, but I just never considered taking that class. The next tips have to do with access to equipment. So my tip is to either find workouts that require no equipment or invest in really basic equipment. So thinking back to when I did my 30-day challenge, 2 of the exercises I wanted to do were hula hooping and jump roping. And so I'm pretty sure I just ordered them on Amazon and they came in a pack together. So right there, I was able to try 2 new activities for a reasonable low cost. And I will emphasize invest in basic equipment because I honestly can't remember the last time I've used the hula hoop or the jump rope. So when you are doing this, I would say prioritize no equipment. But if you do want to spend some money on equipment, don't go overboard at this point. Remember, you're just trying it out. And then another tip in terms of equipment is to rent equipment or to borrow it from a friend. So for example, when I first started playing golf, I rented some clubs from the driving range that I went to. And for about the first year that I was learning how to play golf, I was borrowing my clubs from my boyfriend's brother. And then after I proved to myself that I was committed to golf and it was something that I wanted to do long term, that's when I decided to make the investment. Because things like golf clubs are expensive, and so you don't want to go out and just buy them from the get-go if you don't even know if it's something you'll stick with. And another example is when I did my 30-day challenge, one of the activities was rollerblading, and my sister already had a pair of rollerblades, so I just borrowed hers. And it's probably better that I didn't go out and buy my own pair of rollerblades because I haven't rollerbladed since. These next tips have to do with helping you to gain knowledge around the different types of activities that you're trying, because if you're a beginner, you might not really know where to start. So my first tip is to look up a routine online. If you do a quick online search of pretty much any exercise, I'm sure it will return some results of a basic program that you could follow. So for example, when I did my 30-day challenge and I wanted to try a sprinting routine, I did a quick search and it gave me some sprint intervals that I could follow. When I first got into running a couple years ago, my friend sent me a training plan for a 5K run, and I just followed that plan to a T, and it helped me to go from not running at all to being able to run a 5K within a month or so. Also, when I first started weightlifting and going to the gym by myself, I would just do a quick search and look at images of different weightlifting routines. At the time, TikTok and Instagram were not a thing, really, so there are obviously so many more resources available now. If you'd like to take it a step further, you can go ahead and purchase a program. This is honestly something I wish I did at the beginning of my journey, was spend a little bit of extra money into purchasing a good program to help me with weightlifting. It wasn't until last year that I got my first program, and really that's when I started to see results in increasing my strength and being more consistent was by following a program. You can also seek guidance from a trainer or a friend that you have with experience. So again, connecting this to weightlifting, when I first started at the gym, I got a couple of personal training sessions included in my membership, and that was helpful for me to familiarize myself with some of the bigger lifts that I didn't know anything about before. And I've had other friends with experience who taught me different things about weightlifting. And now some of my friends have reached out to me for support with weightlifting now that I have some of this knowledge. Another thing is when it came to golf, I had no idea what I was doing. And so I went with my friend and with my boyfriend, and they taught me how to play golf because they already had experience with the sport. Now, if you are trying an activity that you've done before, then you probably don't need any guidance, and you can kind of just pick up and start doing this activity again. So thinking back to a couple summers ago, I hadn't ridden my bike in the longest time, and I just pulled my bike out of storage and started riding my bike again, because that's not something you forget how to do. And so if you are feeling overwhelmed by brand new activities, this is a good way to add more variety to your routine by just picking up an activity that you're already familiar with. These next set of tips are related to incorporating some kind of social element into trying out new activities. The first one is to grab a friend with similar interests or goals who wants to try new things out with you. So when I did my challenge a couple of years ago, I played tennis with one friend, I played volleyball with another, and I went on a bike ride with another one of my friends. And this was really fun because we both wanted to pick up these activities, but we hadn't done it in a while. And so this was a good way for us to incorporate more variety into our routine. Another thing that's super fun is to organize a group activity. So during this time of the challenge, organized sports weren't being offered because of the lockdown. And so a group of my friends organized kickball games every week. And about 20 of us got together. We went to a local baseball diamond and we just played kickball for a couple hours, and it was really fun. We've also done this with volleyball, where we just set up a volleyball net in the park and started playing, and it was really fun. If you're looking to do something a little bit more organized, you can find drop-in sports programs near you. I know there's lots of different activities for sports such as hockey and basketball that offer this. You could also reach out to a friend who you know is already playing on a sports team and ask them if you could be a call-up for their team. So maybe you have a friend who plays softball and you have an interest in playing softball but don't want to fully commit to playing on the team yet. You could ask them if you can act as a call-up whenever they need some extra players. And the last tip related to this is if you do want to commit a little bit more, then you can sign up for a sports league for a season. Over the past several years, I've played recreational soccer, which has been a really great outlet for me and a great way to re-inspire my passion for soccer that I had growing up. And so if you do have a sport that you already know you like, I definitely recommend signing up for a league. Okay, and one of my last tips is kind of more of a mindset related tip, but it's to step out of your comfort zone. It will be uncomfortable trying out these new things or incorporating things that you used to do, but I think it's worth it. During my 30-day challenge, one of the things that I tried out for the first time, which was really fun, was paddleboard yoga, and it's exactly what it sounds like. We got on paddle boards, which by the way, I hadn't even done that before, paddled out to a little still area of water, and did yoga on the paddleboard. So that was really cool. And even though I was scared of falling in the water, it was totally worth it to try something new and step out of my comfort zone. The only thing I will say about that is if you are stepping out of your comfort zone and trying something new, be sure to do it in a safe way. I honestly had a little bit of a scare when trying out gymnastics for the first time during my 30-day challenge because I just wasn't doing it in the safest way. I didn't have a mat underneath me, so be smart about it, be safe, and again, seek guidance from someone with experience so that way you can do it in the safest way possible. So the next step in this process of finding your favorite way to exercise, now that you've come up with some ideas of activities you want to try, you've tried a couple things out, the next step is to pick out your favorites. And to do this, really check in with yourself and reflect after trying things out. Did you like it or maybe not? Because you're not going to like everything, and just because someone else likes an activity doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So for example, during the challenge, I tried out dancing, which I already knew I didn't really like. I did it for the purposes of the challenge. It further emphasized the fact that I don't like dancing that much, and that's fine. Someone else might like it, but it just didn't work for me. If you really don't like something, you don't need to do it again. Remember, the mindset that we're going into this is that there's no pressure, no long-term commitment. You can consider giving it another try if something wasn't quite right for you. So maybe the instructor or the studio or the routine weren't for you. Don't write off the option completely, and you can try again. But if you really didn't like something, you can cross it off the list and you don't have to do it again. Now, if you did like some of the activities that you tried, that's great. And consider, is that something that you can see yourself committing to long term? Is it contributing to your health and fitness goals? And would you be willing to invest in equipment or membership so that way you could continue moving forward with this activity? So that's the process. Pick an activity, set a goal, try it out, reflect, and then repeat. Eventually, you'll land on a set of activities that you enjoy. And the next step, now that you've compiled these different activities, is to build your routine, which is something that I'll chat about in a future episode if you'd like. Okay, so now that I've talked about this process, let's finish things off with our community responses for this episode. And I'll start with the questions that I asked you about different types of activities that you do. One question that I asked is, what's your favorite way to exercise? And so to my friend who responded with swimming, thank you for sharing this activity. Another question was, if you could try out a new form of exercise, what would it be? And some of the answers were Pilates, a dance class, and someone said calisthenics, but it's so hard. And yes, I totally agree. Calisthenics is something that I've dabbled in, barely scratched the surface, but it is super challenging, and that's something that I would like to get into a little bit more as well. But yeah, I love the variety of these responses in terms of the activities that you already like doing and things that you want to try out. And I would encourage you to reflect on these questions. So think about, what's your current favorite way to exercise, and what's one new thing that you want to try after listening to this episode. Then going forward, be sure to include more of what you already love, and then this is your sign to consider trying something new as well. I also asked you about what your biggest tips are when it comes to trying out new activities, and there were a lot of you who recommended going with a friend, trying it out with a friend, go with a buddy, and one of you mentioned that accountability is key, and the person who said this is in fact one of my accountability buddies. And yes, it's really awesome to go with a friend because it makes it more fun, definitely makes it less intimidating, and that accountability piece is huge because if you have someone who's relying on you to do this activity with, then you'll be more likely to stay committed if you have that person who is holding you accountable. And another tip was to go to a class with an instructor, which again, totally agree with that suggestion. Moving on to some of the multiple choice questions. The first one was, when was the last time that you tried out a new form of exercise? 41% of you said within the last week or month. Another 41% of you said within the last year. And 18% of you said too long ago to remember. So this is interesting to see the variety of responses. If you have recently tried something new, be sure to celebrate this accomplishment and then consider incorporating this new activity into your routine. And if you haven't recently tried something new, then this is your sign to do it. And the final question is, how many different types of activities do you include in your current fitness routine? Most of you, at 65%, incorporate 2 to 3 activities. 18% of you said just one activity, and 18% of you said 4 or more activities. I would say that I fall into that category of the 4 or more activities. At the end of the day, you just need to pick what's most sustainable for you and pick however many activities you can actually commit to. So that's it for this week's episode. I hope you feel inspired to try something new after listening to this episode. Remember to use that list of 100 ideas that I have linked in the show notes. And my challenge for you is to consider what's one new type of exercise that you're going to try after listening to this episode. Be sure to let me know on Instagram. I would love to hear what you're going to be trying. And thank you so much for listening. I appreciate your support. I appreciate you tuning in these early days of the podcast. Be sure to follow on Instagram so that you can get involved in the next episode and let me know what kinds of topics you want to hear more about. And also, if you could give this podcast a 5-star review, I would really appreciate it because that would help me out to help get this podcast out to more people and help more people on their fitness journey. I hope you have a great rest of your day whenever you're listening, and see you next time. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Always Active podcast. Remember to subscribe to this podcast, and I would be grateful if you could please leave a review. Also, be sure to follow the podcast on Instagram at all.ways.active so that your responses can be featured in future episodes. See you next time.